Hello and welcome to our follow-up video lesson on how we can represent fractions as the sum or addition of its unit fractions. Remember, all unit fractions have a 1 in the numerator. If I say that word numerator and you're not exactly sure of its definition, you need to go back and take a look at video 1. Numerator is a basic word in fractions that you need to know and understand, especially when we start talking about the sum of unit fractions, because unit fractions have 1 as the numerator, or the number on top. It can have any number underneath, but you're looking for that 1 in the numerator. Let's try it out. If I were taking a look at a question, for example, that asked me to represent the number 3/10, or I should say the fraction 3/10, as the sum of its unit fractions, then you would do nothing more than say that 3/10, which is 3 over 10, the numerator with 3 in it, and the 10 is my denominator, is equal to 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10. The reason for that is because 1/10 is a unit fraction. The reason it's a unit fraction is because 1 is in the numerator of each of these fractions. So in this case, yes, you can represent 3/10 as the sum of its unit fractions, because if I take 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10, I will end up with 3/10. The same can be said for the next couple of examples. Again, 4/5. 4/5 as represented by the sum of its unit fractions. Yes, you can absolutely do that. Here's how. I take 1/5, and that's a unit fraction, and I add it 5 times. Because if you have 5 unit fractions that are all 1/5, and you add them together, I'm going to get 4/5. That's because, in this case, when I'm adding fractions, I add the numerators together as if I were adding any other number, and the denominators just get pushed into my answer because they represent the total number of pieces, which in fractions will never change when you are adding with common denominators. So in this case, I can represent 4/5 as the sum of unit fractions, because 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 is going to equal 4/5. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. Can I take this example of 7/10 and make it as the sum of its unit fractions? I absolutely can, as long as I'm willing to spend the time and create 7 unit fractions that are represented by 1 over 10. Please recognize that in unit fractions, my numerator is always 1, but the denominator changes based on what the total number of parts is in the question that I'm being asked. In this question, I'm being asked to represent 7/10 as the sum of its unit fractions, so my unit fraction will always be a 1 in the numerator, and in this example, a 10 in the denominator. Now the next question is, how many unit fractions do I need? Well, the answer is, my numerator tells me that. I need 7 unit fractions. In other words, 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10 isn't nearly enough, because I need 7 of them. So I'm going to take these first 3, copy them, paste them, and now I have 6 unit fractions. Now I just need to add 1 more to make 7, which then proves that yes, 7/10 can be represented as the sum of unit fractions, because if I add 7 1/10 together, I get the total of 7/10. I hope you're getting the idea here, but let's take a look at least one more example with regards to just simple fractions and not mixed numbers. Can I represent the sum of 2/5 as a sum of unit fractions? Yes, by the same exact concept as you've seen in the previous examples, as long as I'm representing this fraction by placing the 1 in the numerator, then I am representing the fraction of unit fractions. And if I add 1/5 plus 1/5 in this example, because the 5 is my denominator representing the total number of parts, I am representing the sum of 2/5 as unit fractions, because 1/5 plus 1/5 will be equal to 2/5. And that is the sum of unit fractions.